In 1978 or 79, the Israelis shot down a Libyan civilian aircraft because it had violated Israeli airspace. President Nixon sent a wire to Gaddafi and to Sadat apologizing for this incident, and the American representative abstained. Why? Because we couldn't create an enemy there. But when the Soviets shoot down an airliner, the same situation, we rise in moral outrage against this act. What is the difference?
Where is the lie? Everything Paul Newman just said is true. He saw the double standards in America's foreign policy long before most people dared to talk about it. One set of rules for Israel, another set for the rest of the world. Newman wasn't exaggerating. He was telling us the truth straight up. Watch the full clip.
The other thing I'd like to address, the whole psychology of this is you don't trust the Russians, you don't do this. That has been so built up in our psyche. And someone mentioned the Korean airliner. All right, the Korean airliner was shot down. There was a lot of hue and cry and moral outrage, and we got it in the United Nations and so forth. In 1978 or 79, the Israelis shot down a Libyan civilian aircraft because it had violated Israeli airspace. President Nixon sent a wire to Gaddafi and to Sadat apologizing for this incident. There was no talk about it going into the United Nations. The International Pilots Associations had their meeting. There was 102 nations that voted to condemn Israel, and 4 that voted not to, and the American representative abstained. Why? Because we couldn't create an enemy there. But when the Soviets shoot down an airliner, the same situation, we rise in moral outrage against this act. What is the difference? Because it's insistent. We must insist that the Soviets have got to be created as an enemy. Otherwise, if they're not really a big enough enemy, how are we going to get appropriations for more arms? People keep talking about national security, and we got to be tough, and we got to be strong. Okay, we're tough, and we're strong, and we've released all these missiles now, the intermediate range missile, the Pershing II, and we're going to have more Tridents too. And what was the Soviet response? The Soviet response is to put cruise missile into attack submarines and put more of them off our coast. Now, if someone's going to tell me that increases our national security, well, I don't know. It's a whole ballgame that I don't understand.
I honestly believe what Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens have been saying, that Israel holds an unusual level of influence over the United States. When you really look at it, you can see it. Think about Donald Trump. Before becoming president, he was one of the most outspoken people when it came to ending wars. He said he'd stop endless wars. He even told Israel at one point to tone things down because it was getting out of hand. But then, suddenly, he changed. Why? The answer isn't hard to see. Netanyahu had him right under his arm. A man who was once bold and independent ended up becoming a puppet on Israel's string. And Paul Newman warned us about this pattern decades ago. He pointed out the hypocrisy. When the Soviets shot down an airliner, America exploded in outrage. But when Israel did the exact same thing to a Libyan plane, there was silence. No United Nations pressure. No condemnations. America abstained. Why? Because Israel couldn't be treated like an enemy. That same double standard still exists today. Look at Gaza right now. The destruction is on full display. Entire neighborhoods wiped out. Families displaced. Children dying. But instead of outrage, Israel receives billions in aid, military support, and diplomatic cover. This isn't about hate. It's about accountability. It's about asking, who really shapes U.S. policy? Why do we apply one standard to the whole world, and another to Israel? Why does one ally get away with actions that would condemn any other country overnight? I want you to listen carefully to Richard Nixon as he explains why America supports Israel. Pay attention to what he says about moral commitment, loyalty, and history. It's surprising, and it raises some serious questions about U.S. policy.
You make the observation in your book, and you say that you have said it many times when you were president of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel, right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis? jeopardize possibly young American fighting men when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value?
United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel, as you know. They're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area. And under the circumstances, that is why American presidents and the American people in the future will support all out the survival of Israel if it's attacked.
You've always been a very tough, pragmatic man. And I just wonder if you were the president of Israel and you heard Richard Nixon talking that way, or for that matter, heard any sitting American president talk that way, and say, but there's really no strategic value anymore, how much faith would you place in that kind of a moral commitment if push really came to shove?
If I were the president of Israel, I put a great deal of faith in it because of the track record of the United States, and also because he would know that that is the way the American people are. There is no doubt whatever of our commitment to Israel.
You just heard Nixon say that no American president will ever abandon Israel, and that this is a moral commitment, not just a strategic choice. And now I understand people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, the late Charlie Kirk, and Megyn Kelly who started asking serious questions about this commitment that we have to Israel. Because to me, this doesn't sound right. When you think about it, what does Nixon's statement really mean? Nixon himself admitted that Israel isn't of enormous strategic value to the United States anymore. If the main reason for supporting Israel is moral, then moral standards should apply in practice. Supporting Israel when it's acting defensively or protecting itself makes sense. But what about when civilians are being killed and large areas are being destroyed? Can blind support still be called moral? Nixon described the bond with Israel as stronger than a formal alliance, suggesting it is permanent and beyond politics. But history shows that U.S. support for Israel has been largely unconditional, across both Democratic and Republican administrations. That raises an important question. Are there ever limits to this support? If it is unconditional, does that mean the U.S. will continue to support Israel even when its actions harm civilians or violate basic ethical principles? The facts are clear. Israel's strategic value is limited. U.S. support is justified by historical and moral reasons, such as the Holocaust and the fact that Israel is a democracy in a region where democracies are rare. At the same time, reports from Gaza, confirmed by international organizations, show civilian casualties and widespread destruction. Nixon praised U.S. loyalty in a moral bond, but loyalty alone doesn't answer the question of when moral commitment should guide support and when it should call for restraint. Moral commitment should mean supporting what is right and questioning what is wrong. If we blindly support everything, no matter what, then loyalty becomes a convenience, not a principle. The real question is not whether the U.S. will always support Israel, but whether that support can be thoughtful and measured, based on ethics as well as history. Right now, that is a question we need to ask seriously.